Have you ever reached the last 5 minutes of a class and thought, I wish my students could have just spoken or written a little bit more today, but we just didn't have time? Well, that moment happens to all of us. And it's not because speaking and writing aren't important, but it's because we think that those activities require a lot of planning and materials and carefully designed tasks. But what if meaningful communication could happen anytime in your lesson with almost no preparation? Well, today I want to share some simple ways to make that happen in your classroom. So let's jump in. Whether you're planning your first lesson or celebrating your 20th year in the language classroom, I understand exactly where you are. I'm Joshua Cabral, and I'm also a language teacher in my 29th year of teaching. Now, I also have the opportunity to support schools and teachers all across the country who are working towards increasing proficiency and building confidence in their students. This is the World Language Classroom Podcast, with over 200 episodes of practical strategies tested in real classrooms just like yours and mine. So let's jump in. Vamos, allons-y. Hello, my friends. Bonjour, mes amis. Hola, mis amigos. Welcome to the World Language Classroom Podcast. I am Joshua Cabral, and thank you, as always, for taking the time out of your week to join me here on the podcast. Just one of the many things that I know that you do as a language teacher that makes you incredibly effective at what you do, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much for finding the time each week to be with me here on the podcast. So today we're going to talk about no prep speaking and writing activities that we can do in our classroom regularly, on the fly, when we need them, so that we can just put them into our lessons as needed to make sure that we are having those opportunities for students to speak interpersonally, presentationally, however that is, as well as do some writing. And to make sure that we're not looking at this as these huge activities that need to happen and all this preparation that goes into it, but some small ways that regardless of the content that we're doing, that we can interject some speaking activities, some writing activities in the moment that don't require a ton of preparation before. So in many language classrooms, speaking and writing mostly happen during assessments or large projects or carefully planned activities. But daily instruction tends to have a lot of work with vocabulary, some grammar, reading and listening activities. And while those are all so important, particularly in our CI-focused classrooms, students are really building their proficiency, particularly in speaking and writing, when they're using the language to communicate meaningfully and not just being engaged in that sort of drill work that might happen in our classrooms at times. So when we have those activities where students might finish a great listening activity or read something really interesting and they've understood the story or they've understood the article and it's a really good place for them to be, we've done a lot of great comprehensible input and we're really seeing that they understand this. But then it's the end of class or the bell rings and students never had a chance to respond with language of their own, because we spend a lot of time in our comprehensible input-based classrooms really making sure that students understand. But even 2 minutes of speaking or 2 minutes of writing can really help students connect comprehension to communication, because many times we'll spend an entire class or two classes making sure that students truly understand before they start the discussion or write about something. And we don't want to do forced output and get students to engage with speaking too quickly if they're not totally comfortable or have the vocabulary down or have acquired the structures, and the same in writing. So I'm not really advocating here for forced output, but I'm really looking at, can we find those short moments, those 2 minutes, those 3 minutes here and there, where we can have students engage in speaking quickly at their level using the new material or writing so that they are engaging with it right away rather than just keeping it at the CI comprehension level. And there's a little bit of a fallacy when we use the terminology of no prep. And I like the word no prep. And whenever I say no prep in a blog post or I put it on a podcast episode, there's always a lot of downloads, a lot of reads. Teachers like the terminology of no prep. But I just want to put it out there that this idea of no prep does not mean that there's no plan. There certainly is a plan. It just might not require creating a document or finding a resource or something like that. So when we say no prep, it doesn't mean, oh, you just do it in the moment. You do have a plan, but it is a plan that doesn't require creating some sort of document for students to engage in the activity. So no prep does not mean no plan. There is a plan. Because sometimes teachers hear no prep activity and imagine something random or filler, but an effective quick task still has a communicative goal behind it. Students are still using the language to describe or react to something, to make a suggestion, maybe offer an explanation or give an opinion. So students are still engaging in all of these language functions. There is a plan. It is intentional, even though it didn't require preparation ahead of time. Because even very short output moments help students connect form and meaning as well. So, for example, instead of having students write 5 sentences with the word to eat, and students could write, I eat this, my sister eats that, we eat this, using all the subject pronouns and the verb forms, and we think, oh, okay, well, that was a writing activity. But that's not really a communicative type of writing activity. Yes, they're using all the different forms of the verb, but they're not really communicating much with it besides just practicing. So instead of saying, write 5 sentences using the word to eat, you could say, your friend forgot his lunch. So what do you suggest that he eats today? Or what are some options of what he could do to get a lunch for today? Now, students are still using the verb to eat, but they're using it to solve a problem where they're not just writing sentences with the verb, but they're actually engaging with it. So you can see that there is a clear plan behind there, that you want students to use the verb to eat in a communicative context to solve this problem, but it doesn't require preparation in terms of having a document to share with them that they will use as a class to engage in this activity. So yes, you're going into it with a plan, but it doesn't require the preparation in terms of providing something to the students. Now, these are those small moments that rather than waiting till the next day because you want to do a larger writing activity, start with a short writing activity so that students can get comfortable using the language in a very controlled way, because this is performance in our classrooms. They're using the language in a very controlled way in a communicative context. So that was just a quick example of how you could do a no prep writing activity in your classroom that could go with pretty much any topic that you're doing. But now I'd like to give you 3 go-to no prep task types that you could use in any lesson. So one of the easiest ways to build communication into your lessons is to have 2 or 3 of these task structures that you can use anytime. And these are the type of tasks that can work across proficiency levels, doesn't matter what the language is. So these are your go-tos. So listen closely to these so you can start using them in your classroom right away, because they require no prep, but you will have a plan. So the first one is to have students describe and guess. And here students will work in pairs, where student A will describe a picture or an object or something that came up in the lesson. There might be a person in the story, a character that they're going to describe. There might be a new event that happened in a CI novel. You may be reading an article. You may have listened to a podcast episode, anything like that, where students are describing something or describing the person and the other student will guess. At a very basic level, you could have a student say, it's an animal, it's small, it likes cheese, and the partner says, oh, it's a mouse. This will work really well for novice learners where you're recycling vocabulary or warm-ups or transitions or things like that. But you can use this at any proficiency level, because if you have students that are working at intermediate low, intermediate mid, where they are focusing on a story, a chapter in a book, or they're reading an article on a website or something that's a current event article where they can describe the different people or the places and say, oh, okay, it talked about two different cities in that current events article. So one student is describing one of the cities and the other one just decides, oh, which one are they talking about? So this requires no prep. It's just about providing the prompt, and that goes with whatever topic that you're doing that day. So the second one I call react and respond. And this is where students react to something that they already saw or already read. This could be a meme, a short reading, maybe even a video clip, anything like that. And so what you can then ask is, do you agree with this person? Why or why not? So now the students are expressing opinions and not just repeating language and retelling the story that they just read or the story that they heard about in the video, but they are now providing their opinion. So the first one was the describe and guess, which is partner work, whereas the second one with react and respond is where students are providing their opinion on whether or not they agree with something. So this would be more so for your intermediate level students because they need a little bit more language to engage this way. But again, does not require any preparation ahead of time, but you do have a plan to give them this prompt. And then the third one is what I call predict and confirm. So after listening or reading part of a story, you can then have students respond to the prompt, what do you think will happen next? You could do this in writing, where students could write 2 or 3 sentences about what they think will happen next, or you can have them discuss in pairs with a partner, and then later they can confirm if they were right once you continue reading or see the end of the story that they're watching. So this creates a real communicative reason to speak and to write, because they can then revisit what they wrote or revisit what they spoke about with a partner as they see the end of the story or the end of the news report that you're watching, that you're listening to. So all 3 of these ideas, describe and guess, react and respond, or predict and confirm, all do not require any preparation. You just have this plan to have students engage with the content with one of these 3 activities after they've engaged with the language in some way. And by having these sort of in your pocket that you can pull out at any time and do it regularly, because students do this 1, 2, 3, 4 times, and you name it and you say, oh, okay, you're going to do a predict and confirm, or you're going to do a react and you're going to respond. They know now what it is. They anticipate what this activity is going to require, so it becomes part of your routine. And it's this way of adding in these small moments for writing and speaking to make sure that they are regular parts of your lesson. And the great thing about all of these is you're really using what you already have. You're just inserting these into what you're already doing. So one of the biggest misconceptions about speaking tasks is that teachers need special materials. But in reality, everyday classroom content can easily become communication prompts. It could be using one of the short activities I just spoke about after you have read or listened to something in class, or you could just simply use an image as a warm-up at the start of class and say, what's happening in this picture? Talk about it, write about it. Or a reading from the lesson, what would you do in this situation? Or a class poll, students ask partners, why did you choose that answer? After you ask, what's everyone's favorite color? Or what's everyone's favorite movie? Or what's everyone's favorite sports team? Whatever that is. And then you ask, why did you choose that answer? So follow-up questions. So what's happening in the picture? What would you do in this situation? Why would you choose that? So all of these are helping to give a reason to write, to give a reason to speak without having to create anything. You're just doing it in the moment, but have them ready to go. Have this posted up next to your desk as you're lesson planning and say, oh, I'm going to do a picture warm-up. I'm going to do a what did you do in this situation? I'm going to do a class poll, and then we're going to ask why we did that. I'm going to use one of of the reflect and respond or the describe and guess or the predict and confirm, that you have those ready to go so you can just insert those into your lessons and know that these are the types of things that take 2 or 3 minutes. But it's 2 or 3 minutes of regular speaking in a communicative context or regular writing on the topics that you're covering in class. And this is to make sure that we are constantly bringing in that speaking and writing to complement so much of the listening and reading that we do in our comprehensible input-based classrooms. And as you're completing these prompts, as much as possible to keep it communicative, if you can keep these prompts open-ended, that's really what's going to help students to dive into using the language, because that's another key feature of these quick tasks is to keep them as open-ended prompts. Because closed prompts, either or, yes, no type questions really limit communication. Because if you ask after reading or listening to something, is the boy happy? And the student answers yes, conversation's over. But if you ask, why do you think the boy is happy? Now, every student might have a different answer. And often prompts naturally support different proficiency levels in the same class because you'll have students answering in different ways, and they may even say things that you didn't expect. But if you do yes, no, either or, that really is just going to be the answer that you get, and then the conversation's over. Keep it open-ended, and students will have to explain a little more, defend something, whatever that is, but they need more than just those yes, no, either or answers. So in this episode, I've shared a few quick examples of no prep speaking and writing tasks that you can pretty seamlessly put into your classroom at any place. But in my Ready for Tomorrow Quick Win course, No Prep Speaking and Writing Tasks, I go a little bit deeper, and in that course, you'll find a framework for designing communicative tasks really quickly, as well as lots of examples at the novice, intermediate, and advanced levels. And you'll have a planning template that helps you turn any lesson into a speaking or writing opportunity. Then there's ideas for recycling student output for future class input. And then with all of my Quick Win PD courses, you get a personalized certificate of completion to document your clock hours, as well as my personal feedback on a lesson idea that you submit. My goal with these Quick Win PD courses, and particularly this one, is to really help you build communication into your lessons without a ton of prep, but a really good plan. So if that sounds useful to you, you can find the course in the show notes, or you can go to wlclassroom.com/no-prep-speaking and writing. So wlclassroom.com/no-prep-speaking and writing, or the link is in the show notes. So I'd like to finish with some practical things that you can be doing right away in your classroom. So what I would like you to do this week is find a time in one of your classes where you're going to add either a 2 to 3 minute speaking or 2 to 3 minute writing moment. It can be at the beginning of class, it can be the end of class, it can be after students read something or listen to something, and have them engage with a partner, use the activities that we talked about in this episode. They're all in the show notes, and you can get those so that you can engage with your students right away. They can start using the language. Make sure that the prompts are open-ended, not yes or no, not either or, because that is going to kill conversation. We want to keep it alive. And so we also want to make sure that if you're going to choose a writing prompt, that you keep it open-ended, because students will have to describe something, explain something, and make sure also that it's at their proficiency level, it's building their confidence. And we just want to make sure that when we get to the ends of our classes, that we're not thinking, oh, we did a lot of CI today, we did a lot of reading and listening, and I did some assessment of where students are in terms of their comprehension, but we really didn't get to any speaking or writing. Try out these activities from this episode so that you are not creating a ton of extra work for yourself, but you're finding moments to make sure that there is speaking, that there is writing happening regularly in your classroom. So I hope that you're walking away from this episode with this idea that speaking and writing in the classroom don't always require elaborate planning, that sometimes they just require a good prompt and 2 minutes of time. And those small moments of real communication that you can repeat daily and weekly are ultimately what going to build your students' proficiency and also their confidence. And if you would like a clear system and framework for continuing to build these comprehension skills each day in your classroom, be sure to check out my quick win course, No Prep Speaking and Writing Tasks, that is ready for you in the show notes, or you can go to wlclassroom.com/no prep speaking and writing. So thank you very much for listening and for all the incredible work you do to help your students become confident, real-world communicators. If you would like more ideas to bring proficiency-based strategies to your teaching, you'll find options for you and your school in the show notes and on my website. I will talk to you soon. Bye for now. Thank you for listening. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. And let's stay connected on social media. You can find me at WL Classroom pretty much everywhere. You'll also find lots of ideas, suggestions, and resources on my website, wlclassroom.com. Now stay curious, keep learning, and continue the great work you do inspiring and supporting your students.